Hey readers, welcome back to Reading Room. Today I have reviewed 2 books so far. This is the third, and we're back to Natasha Preston. This is one of the ones that I actually finished a while ago, and I just have not had the time to sit down and record it. So, finally getting around to that. After I record this one, I only have 2 left that I have not gotten around to record yet that I need to record. So we'll see when I do those. I'm not sure quite yet. But this is The Lost by Natasha Preston. As you can see, as we always have to show the flower because these always have flowers. This one is really, really interesting because it is slightly more of a, how do I say this? It's slightly more of like a Hunger Games almost type situation. Because instead of trying to figure out who's murdering people around an island or a cabin or a lake or being an evil twin, like her other books. This one is interesting because people have been disappearing, and it's sort of around the protagonist's hometown and like sort of nearby surrounding areas. And this is a book that at so many points I wanted to fling it across a room because the protagonist made some of the stupidest decisions I've ever encountered anyone decisioning. And so because of said stupid decisions, she ends up being put into a sort of prison that these people have designed for their own twisted entertainment. And it's in sort of this remodeled compound where they have to, like, all the doors have a lot of complicated locks. Like, they can't just go out a door and try to get through a window. Like, it's really designed to keep people in there, and then every once in a while a character will be taken, be tortured for a while, put back. Like, they're provided like food and basic clothing, and like I think they have some DVDs and like some cards, and so they have like really basic entertainment, but clearly not the ideal situation to be in. It's hard with this one because it is, I would say, kind of more unique within her plots, compared to like The Fear of the Island. Those kind of start to get a little bit more similar to each other. This one is kind of different because they know all along who's doing it to them, and they have this constant feeling of like isolation and helplessness, but it's how do we escape, how do we survive, rather than like who's doing it and am I next kind of thing, which I feel like does make it a little unique. So it's hard to say. Natasha Preston's books always leave me really confused because I feel like they are really addicting. They're also kind of unhealthy for me. But I would say that this one, I'm a little bit conflicted about how I feel about it. Because on one hand, it is kind of more unique. But on another, it was hard to put down because I wanted to know what happened next, but I also feel like there have been some of her other books where I feel like the plot itself kind of was more interesting. I also will say I'm reading The Cellar right now, And I'm not going to say anything about that plot-wise in terms of, like, spoilers or reviewing it yet, but I do feel like this one is kind of a similar plot to that. And at first when I read this, I was like, oh, this is pretty unique among her other books. And now that I'm reading The Cellar, I'm like, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it is kind of similar. Getting locked somewhere and having to figure out how to get out, and if they can get out. So it's hard to really give it quite as many unique plot points as I used to be able to, because I feel like it is kind of just the same story again. Not the same story, and also I'm not that far into The Cellar yet, so I can't really say, but, like, I feel like the premise of just being trapped in something, yeah, it's different than, like, there's murders happening around town, who's doing it, am I a target, which is what a lot of her stories are, but The Cellar has sort of a similar thing. So it's so hard. I feel like the more Natasha Preston books I read and review, the harder it is for me to figure out what exactly to say about them, because a lot of them it's hard to say stuff without it becoming a spoiler, but also I just am so conflicted by so many of them. This one, the ending did also kind of make me want to throw stuff at a wall. Cosmos is here. There you go. Yeah, he is very warm because he's been sitting in the sun. But yeah, I feel like this book is interesting because, it's such a close situation. The end of it, I was like, okay, this is gonna work out, and not quite the way that I thought it would. Something happens. And it is a different thing that happens compared to some of the other books where it's like, the last word of the book is bang, and it implies someone's been shot, and you don't know who. It could be one of, like, 5 people. And I think I can say that in this review because it doesn't give away what book I'm talking about. There is a book where that is what happens, and it upsets me. I want to know what happened. This book, it ends in a way that really, really, really feels like cheating. Like, I feel like that's not an ending. You can't just write that and leave it. Which is how I feel about a lot of her endings. But with some, like I talked about in my review of The Twin, it's like I could write myself a different ending and it sort of fixes that. In this situation, it really doesn't. It feels a little bit like a betrayal, because you've been wanting to support the character the whole time and being on their side the whole time, and then at the end it's like, what was all of it for? Like, you know, it's hard to really describe that without, again, getting into too many spoilers, but this book, this author in general, it's causing me problems because her books are so addicting. I actually only have 3 left that I own that I haven't read. I have Awake, The Party, and then The Cellar, which I'm currently reading. And so I've also got a really distracting pug on my lap, and he's being really cute. But I also feel like this book is interesting because it goes into a lot of different torture techniques, and I know that's kind of like a weird thing to think about, but as an author myself, I'm like, I think it would be super fun to see her search history when writing this book, because I'm gonna assume that the author herself has not experienced, I hope she has not experienced most of these torture methods, if not all of these torture methods, but she writes them so graphically that it's like, you know, she's researching that. And this might just be because I'm an author too that I pick up on this kind of thing, but it's like, I want to see what she was researching for this, because I feel like in some of her other books it's like, yeah, if someone gets stabbed with a sharp object, they bleed and die. It's like, kind of, you get it. If you get shot, it's painful. I feel like people, even if they haven't been shot, have kind of a general understanding of like how that works and everything. But with these torture methods, it's so interesting how detailed she gets with them. So I will say that is kind of like a content warning. If you have been tortured, this might be hard for you to read. Also, some of them, as me being an autistic person, made me really, really uncomfortable because I have sensory problems, one of them being light, and that is one of the torture methods they do, is like really intense light and then really intense darkness, and really intense light, really intense darkness, and then also like really quiet and then blasting stuff really loudly. And those both made me really uncomfortable because I was like, okay, that sounds really, really unpleasant. And it wasn't even like they were being tortured for information. It was all for entertainment for the people doing it and like fun for them. So also there is, I did mention that this is kind of like the Hunger Games, and I think that the way that it's like the Hunger Games is something that isn't really explained as early on, so I'm not gonna say exactly what happens because that would be more of a spoiler. But Cosmos is now taking up all the chair. But that part is a very interesting plot point. And that's an interesting one because that's very much more like psychological torture than physical, the way that some of the others are. I mean, I feel like all of it is affecting them psychologically, because being tortured physically would affect that too, but this other situation is very, very interesting and somewhat unique. And yeah, I do feel like the character at first is just so stupid. Which this character is definitely not one of my favorite characters in Natasha Preston's series. There have been some where they actually are more intelligent, and it's just the situation that they're in is like kind of hard for them to do anything with their intelligence. In this situation, she 100% walked into this situation and gave herself to the situation at the beginning. And I was so mad the whole time reading that, because I'm like, maybe it's because I have read books like this, but I feel like that's just common sense that you don't do stuff like that. So for anyone watching this who could make stupid decisions, if a person especially if you are female and in high school and the person is a man who is older, like college age, if that person invites you somewhere and tries to remove you from your phone or communication devices after also locking the car doors before they try to remove your communication devices, first of all, don't even get in that car. There are not many good reasons that a college-age guy would want to do stuff with a high school-aged female unless they knew each other well in advance. Like, if it's, like, your sibling's friend or, like, your childhood friend who just happens to be a few years older. If it's, like, a random college guy who you kind of know around town but, like, haven't really interacted with, don't go places with that person. If you want to hang out together at a public event, that's better, but that should be a red flag to people, and people should use critical thinking and logic, and I feel like this character was just like, oh, attractive, rich guy, and I'm just like, that's stupid. I personally would never do anything relating to a guy I don't know well, just because they're attractive and rich, and maybe that's me, but those are not motivating factors for me to go somewhere with a guy I don't know for a number of reasons. I also wouldn't do that with a female person I don't know. I would feel like something's weird about that. I just wouldn't really go places with anyone in the situation that they are in. Or if I was going to, I would tell someone first who I'm with, because these characters didn't, and it didn't end well for them. So yeah, this is one where, again, it just I want female protagonists to not be this stereotype of attractive guy, rich guy, and then they do stupid things because of it. And not all of her books have that. There are a lot of times where I think in all of her books so far that I've read, the protagonist is female. And in a lot of them, there are stupid decisions that are made. I personally feel like this book has the stupidest decisions that are made for the stupidest reasons. And I also want to say, having said that, I do understand that people who are in real life situations like this, sometimes it's out of their control, sometimes they're manipulated into it, sometimes they are, like, something happens where they do something that outwardly is a stupid decision, but to them at the time it felt like the option that they had. And I don't want to say that anyone who is a real victim of that kind of situation is stupid for what happened to them. But I want to say, if you are presented with that situation, don't make the stupid decision. It's kind of, I don't think it's like a super common situation, but be aware of what's happening, and if anything feels weird, don't go with people. Don't be separated from a public space, especially if there is this kind of weird age dynamic. And like, my sister is in high school right now, and it's like, if a college guy was talking to her like this, it would be really weird. She doesn't know college guys. And I don't think that she would make that decision. I don't think she'd go with them. But I think she's also more like, cautious about stuff. But, yeah, everyone just... I feel like these books teach you what not to do in a lot of situations. And sometimes, yes, the character is in a situation where they are not able to separate themselves from the situation. They can't really do much. I feel like The Island is a good example of that. The Twin is a good example of that. But don't sneak out at midnight and walk alone through town if there's murder around. Don't get in a car with strange guys who you barely know. Don't give anyone your phone if you don't know them well and you're going into a place where you may need to be able to contact people. There's just a lot of examples in these books of what not to do, so I feel like, instead of just complaining about this book the whole time, I'm turning this review into a little bit of like a use logical thinking and don't do these things kind of video. But, these books are bad for me. I was showing my friends some of them the other day. We were at a bookstore together just looking around, and I was like, these books are awful. They're addicting, and it's unhealthy, and I honestly had to put the seller down after I got like 5 chapters in, and it was during when I was working on finals week, and I had to put it down, and I haven't actually been back to that yet because I was reading a couple other books, and I was also like, I need to not pick this up again until I have time to just be able to get lost in it and read it for hours, because that's what these books do, but they are kind of problematic for me too, so, with that said, let me know what you thought if you've read this book or any of the other Natasha Preston books. Let me know what you're currently reading. Also, if you haven't, please subscribe. It really helps me out. And keep reading. Bye!